Hey, it's Jim, and this is level 1 of the CFA program, topic on ethics and professional standards, and the learning module, the very long learning module on guidance for standards 1 through 7. We're going to have separate slide decks and recordings for each one of those 7 standards. But I want to say 2 things before we get into the slide deck. The first one is some advice that I can give you based on my experience of studying and preparing and taking the exam, hundreds of years ago. Back in the early 2000s when I was going through the program, they had the actual ethics handbook, and I would carry that thing around all the time. I did it for probably a couple months. And whenever I had a moment, I would just open it up and just read an example or read a standard or read something. And it became part of my kind of daily DNA. Now, I'm guessing you guys don't actually have the physical copy, but you have it on your phone or your tablet. So leave it open and look at it every day. Commit to looking at something, and even if it's just 30 seconds, just do it every single day until the exam. That will go a long way in helping you prepare because, these 7 standards, there's lots and lots of breadth, but there's depth as well. Second thing I want to say is that I'm guessing you've heard that the Institute says something like, your performance on the ethics questions is relatively important. And, there's even this term out there called like the ethics adjustment. I have no idea whether this is true or not, but this is what I do know, that the better that you do in the ethics section, the greater is your probability of passing. Pretty sure the Institute uses this at the margin. So if you have what might be a failing score for your total performance, but you made 90% in ethics, well, I think they're gonna bump you up to passing. So this is super important. Now these LOSs are pretty broad. We're gonna demonstrate, we're gonna distinguish, and then the third one is probably the most important of the 3 because the posted questions sound an awful lot like, here's a scenario, what should be done? So recommend practices and procedures. That's pretty important. So there's standard 1, professionalism. Notice there's an A through E. Since this is level 1, you guys would not be aware of this, but this used to be just A through D, but this year they added E for competence. And then we'll have slide decks, as I mentioned a little bit ago. We'll have slide decks on every one of these 7 standards. And so if you take a look at the actual learning module, each one of these standards is broken down into three kinds of categories. The first one is the actual standard. The second one is guidance. And then the third one is, hey, what to do about this kind of stuff. So I'll show you that as we go through this. So there's the standard. Knowledge of the law. What does that mean? Well, the Institute doesn't want us to be lawyers, but they want us to be able to know a whole bunch of stuff. So we need to know what the laws and the rules and the regulations are. Now remember, laws, those are legal things. Rules and regulations, those are, instituted by some kind of a governing body. Maybe it's the government, maybe it's a local government, maybe it's the federal government. I don't know, maybe it's the galaxy government, right? If we're in a Star Wars kind of a universe. Hey, if you get a Star Wars question on the exam, that would be super cool, but I don't think the Institute has any kind of a sense of humor when it comes to making up these exams. But notice what we put in bolded down there. This seems to be like popular questions here. Make sure that you comply with the more strict law. Now, we're going to learn about all of these rules and regulations inside of the CFA Institute world. But there are possibilities out there where some governments have laws or rules or regulations that are more strict. Make sure you follow the more strict. So here's the second component here, the guidance. So what do we need to do? We need to understand, we need to comply. We need to make certain that we follow the changes in the law. And you've heard me say this before. This is what I tell my students, and I tell you guys this all the time. Read the Wall Street Journal, and that will keep you up to date, at least on from a federal level. Here, of course, if you're in the United States, but there are other newspapers throughout the world. Newspapers, hey, I get my Wall Street Journal every day in the mail, and I read the physical copy. And look at the bottom there. Yeah, new local or international communication requirements. So that could be part of the question stem. Just make sure you know this kind of stuff. There's probably some good questions on the difference between the applicable law and the more strict law. And so just make sure you do more strict. So you need to know what laws apply in which jurisdictions. And what the Institute has emphasized, and this really is only in the last several years, is a distinction between regular clients. I'll just put myself in that regular client. I'm a 63-year-old college professor. I have this much money to invest, and so I'm kind of a regular client. But the Institute is now emphasizing, ultra high net worth clients, where clients have, can you see my hands all the way out there? Clients have this much to invest. And so those ultra high net worth clients, they probably are not just investing, in the state of Arkansas or the state of Alaska. They're probably investing all over the world. So you need to know these global rules and laws. And that's likely to be the link between ultra high net worth clients who have investments in several different countries. And then you have to worry about all that kind of stuff. Just follow the more strict law. Look at that second point there. Whenever there are no laws or no regulations, then of course everything that we're doing in these slide decks is critical. Yeah, the bottom point down there, this is probably a good exam question about operating in a different country in which something is legal, but it's illegal in the domestic country. There are a bunch of countries out there that allow insider trading. In fact, some countries even promote it. But here in the United States, of course, we don't promote it. We don't allow it. And some people even end up in prison when they violate that law. So make certain that you are aware that just because it's legal somewhere else doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Now, implied in all of this knowledge of the law is the awareness that, we don't operate in a vacuum. So we have all these different colleagues around us. And we need to make sure that we do not influence our colleagues to break any of these laws. And that they, and probably this is more important, that they don't influence us to violate any kind of these activities. And then there's this cool word down at the bottom. We need to dissociate from that activity. And that dissociation can involve a couple of different things here. All right, so when it's a colleague, when it's a client, when it's an employer. So you have three different potential exam questions. And so if it's a colleague, the Institute is reasonable. It's not like they're asking you to do some crazy things. Look at the first point in each one of these. Just sit down and have a visit. My dad used to always enjoy, he'd call it visiting time. Whenever I would come over, he would say, let's have some visiting time. So that's really what this is. Just go ahead and have a conversation. And the conversation probably clears up, 50%, 75%. I mean, I'm making those numbers up. But that discussion then is very likely to bring extra knowledge into the kind of the decision making, so you and your colleague or your client or your employer can kind of figure out what the solution is. Now with the colleague, you can always bring it to your supervisor's attention. With a client, this is a little bit different. I think the best thing is just to say, what, if you're going to do that kind of stuff, I'm going over here, you find somebody else to do it. If it's the employer, then, the first step is to say, what, I don't really want my name attached to this. And then in an extreme case, you could say, what, I'm super talented. I got lots of people over there. They're willing to hire me. Encourages members to report potential violations. There's a web page and there's an email address. What I encourage you guys to do, if you have a moment, is to go to the CFA Institute webpage and read some of the actual live cases of violations of all of the standards. Some of these are fascinating kinds of events. Now, I would have no idea if the Institute would take those real live cases and extract some of that information and put that question on the exam. But clearly, it gives you some good ideas. It also gives you a sense of, how the Institute rules on all of these kinds of violations, which of course gives you a better foundation for. Did you like that? It's kind of like Vanna White on Wheel of Fortune. Continuing with knowledge of the law, what else do we need to know? We need to know about our investment products. This is super important, especially since the 2008 financial crisis. We learned all about, mortgage-backed securities and structured notes and all those kinds of crazy and very, very cool securities that have been blamed for that crisis. Although I'm not one of those people who blame the innocent security. I blame, all the people around it, recommending it and trying to use it. But of course, investment products must be in compliance. We need to make sure our business partners know about all this stuff. And then look at what we have down there, cross-border law. So this ties back to what I was saying earlier. So here's the third part that I was saying. These are the recommended procedures. So how do we do this? We stay informed. We review all of our procedures. We maintain copies of all of our current files. So let's take a look at a quick example here. Here we have a dude, CFO of Excel Financial, headquartered in Spain. He's leading the IPO underwriting process for a major client. Spain regulation forbids managers from participating. All right, so we have got this other country out there. They forbid it. That's a key part of this question stem. So the process is going to be split between Excel and FJ Capital, headquartered in Turkey. So we have another country out there. Turkey has no rules or regulations. So that means that it's not anarchy. It's not like we can go to Turkey and just do whatever we want. So no rules or regulation. That tells us that we need to be aware of, well, in this case, standard one, but all of the standards. Now that last sentence there, this is the kicker. So this dude, he allocates a percentage of the IPO to himself through FJ Capital. On the surface, that sounds an awful lot like there's probably something going on here that's not correct. So make sure that you read the question correctly. Have we violated the standard? We have a couple of choices. There are 2 no's and a yeses. So my advice is to read the 2 no's and see if those no's make any sense, because the standard does not forbid managers, because the underwriting process is shared. But what do you think the answer is? Of course, that answer has to be yes. He does not follow the stricter rule of no participation in the IPO. Moving on to B, independence and objectivity. This goes back to something that my father used to try to teach me when I was a little guy. And he would say things like, you know what, son, I'm hoping that when your mom and I are not home, that you don't go and eat some candy because you're going to ruin your appetite for dinner. And he would say, you know what, if you can abide by that rule, just eating a little piece of candy, that doesn't seem like too terrible a violation. When you get older, you're going to do the same thing. If you have independence and objectivity and integrity and honesty, if you have those in little things, then you have them in big things later on in life. So there's my little personal advice and history for the great advice my father gave me back in the old days. All right, so what are we doing here? We must not offer or solicit or accept any gift, benefit, compensation, or consideration. So what is that telling us? That's telling us simply that, you know what? We've been through the CFA program, right? We hold the designation. We're smart, right? We're skilled. We do all these kinds of things. And so we have some kind of a process under which we make a recommendation or an investment decision or something, whatever that is. And what we need to do is be able to look ourselves in the mirror every night before we go to sleep, lay our head down on the pillow and say, you know what? That was my best effort. And I wasn't influenced by anything out there because, boy, gifts and benefits, compensation, they could be tempting, but, we need to be able to live with ourselves as we go through life. All right, so what does this mean for guidance? External sources may include almost anything that you can think of. The extreme examples on the exam would be something like, hey, we're being asked to evaluate this company. Maybe it's a bond issue, maybe it's a rating, maybe it's equity, maybe it's derivatives, whatever it is. And the company shows up at our front door and says, here are 4 tickets to the World Cup, or 4 tickets to the Super Bowl, or, oh my gosh, this sounds like a great deal. But think about it. If you get these tickets to go to the World Cup and you have the greatest time of your life, it's going to be super hard to be independent and objective. So just being aware that your objectivity and independence can be influenced by receiving some of these gifts. So my really basic advice is to just say something like, you know what, I'd love to go to the World Cup or the Super Bowl, but I'm just going to have to reject it. That's just my first thought. But then you get down into different levels, so World Cup tickets are up here and a cup of coffee would be down here. A cup of coffee, I buy coffee and people buy coffee for me. I shouldn't say that. I don't drink coffee, but how about a slushie? Oh my gosh, I'm willing to accept a slushie from anybody who's willing to buy a slushie for me. But the important thing here is that let's go ahead, look at the very bottom there, a couple words in some of those bullet points. Disclose. If you get something, just disclose it. When I was going through the program, I'm pretty sure, I can't really remember exactly because it was so long ago. I'm pretty sure the Institute had a dollar amount attached to it. And I think it was $100. That if you accept anything less than $100, it was fine. Anything over $100 was not fine. And so, I always think about this. This is just the way my brain works. What if it's $101? Why is that worse than $99? It's just $2 at the margin. But I wouldn't worry about all that. Just think about, there are some gifts that just happen regularly in the course of a lifetime. Those are probably okay. But I would disclose at every instance. Now, would I disclose a slushie if I'm rating Procter & Gamble and I'm in Cincinnati at their corporate headquarters, and we go out to lunch, and after lunch, and I pay for my own lunch, but then on the way home, I look at it and I say, oh my gosh, I would love to have a cherry slushie, and I don't have any money on me anymore. And the guy says, it's only $1, I'll go in and buy it for you. So I don't know if I would disclose a slushie. If the word slushie appears on the CFA Institute exam, then I have won. All right, how about recommended procedures here? Protect the integrity of opinions. That's important. Create a restricted list. This is probably a really good exam question, so that we need to make certain that we release just factual information. And then restrict special cost arrangement, right? Hotel charges, transportation, we should pay for all those ourselves. Here, this first part up there, this is what I was saying. Just limit the gifts. It's easy just to say no. I think it's just easy to say no. How about independence policy? We should probably have a formal written document that outlines accepted behavior and unacceptable behavior. And then the Institute is very big on appointing a compliance officer, because the Institute, it doesn't require us to be lawyers, but we need to surround ourselves with people who know the law and know all the rules. So you have a compliance officer. So it's really just super easy to pick up the phone and call him or her and say, hey, here's the deal. Well, what should I do? All right, so let's finish this section with a quick question. So here we are. We hold the designation. We receive a tip that a pension fund is searching for a new external fund manager. The selection manager is an avid golfer. The selection manager also holds the charter here. So let's see. Martinez intends to establish a close rapport. Intends to establish. Notice we bolded that word, intends. So what we're doing is we're trying to figure this out. All right, what does this dude do? What is he like? Now, those of you who are not golfers might not think much of this, but Yang with expensive golf clubs and pays for several lunches at the golf club. All right, so let's just think about that. Expensive golf clubs. Those of you who are not golfers, what do you think expensive golf clubs are? Well, I know for a fact that I have some of my friends who just went for a golf fitting, and they got all sorts of clubs. They got the whole set of clubs, even the putter. They were fitted, they did the launch monitor, they did all this, and it was over $5,000. So that sounds a little bit higher than the $100 that I was telling you about earlier. Now, the paying for several lunches at the golf club, it's not like going to Sheets or Rudders. You guys have those things in your areas, convenience stores where you can get a sandwich for $5 or $7. I mean, lunches at country clubs, those are $19 for a tuna sandwich. So, yeah. So the question then becomes, did one or both of them violate this? And I'm guessing you knew that both of them do that because one is trying to influence, and then Yang should not accept any of those gifts. Misrepresentation. This is what I tell all my friends when we're watching games on TV. To be successful in sports, no matter what sport it is, with the exception of golf, you need to be able to fake the other person out, whatever sport it is. And this is really the fake out standard here. So we don't want to fake anybody out. No misrepresentation in any kind of analysis that we do. So what does this mean? How do we fake people out? Well, we omit something. We manipulate facts. We guarantee return. We falsify records. We plagiarize. And then social media, you guys have heard me say this multiple times. I have no idea what social media is. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to abuse social media, but I know enough to know that if I had an Instagram account and I had 1 billion followers out there, I could say, hey, you know what? I think that Procter & Gamble, I used that as an example earlier, I think Procter & Gamble was undervalued. Their stock price is going to triple in the next week. Little did anybody know that yesterday I bought, $100,000 worth of Procter & Gamble. So that goes out there and everyone says, oh my gosh, look at Jim. He's the smartest guy ever. I'm going to go buy Procter & Gamble. So the price goes up and then I win, right? That sounds like abuse. All right, so what are these recommended procedures? So this makes perfect sense based on what we were doing just a little bit ago, right? Written list of the firm's services and qualifications of each member. And by the way, remember that you're not allowed to say things like, hey, I'm Jim. I've held the CFA designation for 25 years or 23 years, whatever it is. And that makes me really smart. That makes me a super expert on duration and convexity. I'm better than all those people over there. But I can say something like, hey, I have 25 years of experience. I remember something about an issue, this is years and years ago, about, am I allowed to say something like, oh, I passed all 3 levels on the first attempt? I don't really know if that's interesting or not. I myself did not. I've told you guys this before. I myself did not at that level 3. Updating web pages. Oh, yeah, developing a plagiarism policy. Those of you who've been following along, there's lots of accusations of plagiarism out there. I'm not really sure whether they're accurate or not. But my advice is to make certain that, you just don't use anybody else's stuff. And if you do, then just tell everybody about it. Say, hey, I agree with Betty over there who thinks this and this and this. And you can go to Betty's webpage and see all of her stuff. But I agree with her. And plus, I'm going to add a couple of extra things there. I mean, that sounds super reasonable. All right, quick question here. Investor briefing for her client. She would like to explain a whole bunch of stuff. Price to sales, real returns, whatever those things are. She finds these descriptions on a popular finance website, copies these verbatim without acknowledging the author. So this is clearly a violation based on what I just said. So clearly she has violated because she has not referenced the original authors. You know how easy it is just to say, Betty is super smart. I love Betty. Maybe you guys know Betty and love Betty, but I agree with Betty. All right, how about misconduct here? I love telling the story to my students, and I've probably said this in other recordings, maybe level 2, maybe level 3 as well. Do you guys remember years and years ago, there was in an NBA game, there was a fight between two big men. And, one guy got a rebound and they were scuffling and they squared off and there was a little bit of a duke out. And one of the guys went over and laid on the scorer's table on the side of the court. And a fan threw some popcorn or beer at him. I forget what it was. And the dude ran up into the stands and there was a big brouhaha. So I started thinking, these are great CFA exam questions. What if the dude in the stands held the designation and was drinking beer during the whole game and threw beer there and get up and they had a fight on, it was on television, went on ESPN. I was thinking, okay, so this doesn't have anything to do with finance, doesn't have anything to do with investments, doesn't have anything to do with CFA stuff, but clearly this is some kind of misconduct. And so look at that last part, reflects adversely on their professional reputation. All right. So conduct that paints a bad picture, and this could be almost anything, right? So, if you're just a regular person going through life, and you're kind to people and you're courteous, and you stop at the red lights, you don't speed. If you ever get pulled over by the policeman, you put your hands on the wheel, you roll your window down. I mean, whatever those kinds of things are, you just you do all these things that regular, old, natural, normal people do during the course of their lifetime. So what we want to do is make sure that we paint an excellent picture of the CFA Institute and the designation. We want to represent that extremely well, because let's face it. Now, look, you guys are here, somewhere in preparing for level 1, and this is really a kind of a club thing. You want to get in the club. And the club is a prestigious club, right? I mean, there's, the fixed number of people who hold the designation out there. So the CFA Institute makes it relatively difficult. They say things like, you need to study for 300 hours or 800 hours or 12,000 hours, whatever it is. You need to study, and then you need to perform, right? It's like the practice for a football team, and then they need to perform to win, and you need to pass the 3 exams. So that's all a part of this. So you do all this work. And so, of course, the Institute wants us to behave properly. Now, a couple of interesting things here. Look at that middle bullet point there. Yes, there's some activities and behaviors that may not be illegal that might paint a bad picture, like drinking beer and then throwing popcorn or beer on a basketball player. So what are recommended procedures here? Code of ethics, that makes sense. List of potential violations. And by the way, clearly this links back to what I was saying in my recommendation to go to the CFA Institute webpage and read about all the stuff that's going on. You can see actual violations. So you can use that to come up with a list of potential violations. Yeah, background checks, that makes perfect sense. All right, so here we are. Investment analyst, member of a protection environment organization, champions environmental protection. Okay, his free time, he protests and arrested and fined. Now, when we signed the contract, any employee arrested for committing offenses within the company is immediately terminated. All right, so the question is, under the CFA Institute, Courtney's actions. So look, there's 2 violates, right? So violated her employment contract, violates because she was arrested and fined. But what's the answer? Yeah, of course, the Institute is not preventing us from standing up for something that we believe in. Back here, it's the environment. It could be almost anything, right? But if you happen to get arrested and you do it peacefully, right? Those things that relate to personal convictions, those are all okay. So look at that last part there. If a member's professional reputation, integrity, or competence are not harmed. Now, there could be a question where let's suppose you're sitting down, wherever that is, you're protesting, you're sitting down, and the police come and they arrest you. And during the arrest, you wrestle with the policeman and you throw him or her down on the ground and you kick him or her, and you stand up and you scream and you swear and you do whatever those kind of, oh, now that's a different issue. All right, how about the last one, competence? So this is a new one. So I would look for a question. I mean, if the CFA Institute thought that it was important to add this to this standard, then it sounds to me like it's a very likely question to show up. So what does this one tell us? Maintain competence necessary to fulfill their professional responsibilities. So think about it. You're going through 300 hours here in level 1, 300 in level 2, 300 in level 3. Then you have to have the work experience. Then you have to perform on the exams. You got to do all that stuff. But that's not the end of it. You guys remember graduation speeches. I go to 2 graduations every year, so I hear this all the time. And every graduation speaker, or at least most graduation speakers, say, hey, this is not the end of your life. This is just the beginning. Well, it's the same thing applies here. So what we need to do is have that spark in our brain that says, okay, I've done this. I'm super proud, but I need to continue to maintain and improve. This is why I do all this stuff. This is why I read the Wall Street Journal every day. This is why I read journal articles every day. This is why I do all this stuff, so that I can continue to learn and learn. All right, how about guidance here? In order for us to act with integrity and competence and diligence, we need to know stuff, right? So look at these words: knowledge, skills, abilities, underlying principles. So the question then becomes, how do we do this? And the answer is, well, we do whatever it takes for us to maintain and improve. Now, there's one probably a little bit of a trick question. Look down at the bottom. That doesn't mean that if we have the knowledge and the skills and the abilities that we're always going to be right. So just because we do all this good work, perform our due diligence, we have integrity, we're not unduly influenced by anybody out there, and we make a recommendation that Procter & Gamble is going to increase by 10%, and then a year later, Procter & Gamble stock price is down 90%. Well, that doesn't mean that we have failed and violated this standard. What it means is that we need to learn from our mistakes. Yeah, look at, it does not mandate participation in a particular continuing education program, but it says something like, you know what, you need to go ahead and make sure that you do something, whatever that means. So here's the whatever that means. Professional development, certifications and designations. I know where I teach, we have a whole bunch of certifications in finance and in nursing and engineering and all those kinds of things. And it might be, 3 or 4 different kinds of classes. Conferences and seminars, training, studying. Somewhere down there it doesn't say read the Wall Street Journal, but I'm not sure that the Institute could get away with that. All right, one final exam question here. Notice that bolded at the very top. That's going to be important. So she's recently transitioned from her role as a senior analyst to a position head of global equity research. All right. She's responsible for overseeing the firm's global equity research team. Overseeing. All right. So to prepare, she reads extensively on global market trends, attends investing conferences, and holds regular meetings with her teams. All right. So is she in compliance, or has she violated this? Well, notice, and this is a great question because it kind of leads you down the path. You want to say something like, yeah, it looks like look at Jim. She did all the stuff that you just told us. Global market, conferences, regular meetings. But what didn't she do? She did not undertake any training on supervisory responsibility. So whatever that means, how to be a supervisor is very different than how to evaluate the duration of a bond or shares of stock and the systematic risk by companies in Germany or Spain. And that takes us through Standard 1. We'll do Standard 2 in the next video. So I want you to go ahead and get out the learning module. And at the end of Standard 1, there are, I believe, 8 examples, and they're really, really short. You can get through those in 8 minutes, and I want you to go do that now. Hopefully, what we talked about here will lead you to the correct answers in, oh gosh, at least 6 out of 8 of those, right? That sounds like a passing score. And then, and by the way, I don't say this in every video, and I probably should say it more often, but you should go to our webpage and click under, do you guys do this? Click under, what's it called? Like practice questions or something like that. And under professionalism, I think we have 1 million practice questions. And, practice, practice, practice. So look at the learning module for information on what the Institute is thinking is important, and then link that back to the questions that we have on the webpage. So, hey, thanks for watching. Have a great day and good luck studying.